For the past 26 years, he has published the Brazilian UFO magazine. It is the longest-lasting magazine devoted to UFO ET phenomena in the world today. Brazilian UFO magazine now has two companions, UFO Special and UFO Documental. All three are monthly and circulate all over Brazil and Portugal. He's also the founder and director of the Brazilian Center for Flying Saucer Research, the largest organization of its kind in South America, with over 3,300 members. But of perhaps greatest importance is the fact that he is the creator of the campaign UFOs, Freedom of Information Now. He heads the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers that has recently worked with the Brazilian military to examine for the first time, secret UFO documents. And now, through the efforts of the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers, Brazil has officially disclosed over 5,000 UFO documents. In fact, if Brazil should end up being the first disclosure nation, it will be in large measure due to the tireless efforts of our next speaker. Please welcome A.J. Gavard to X-Conference 2010.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Are you all awake? Who had the idea of having wine just before my lecture? I was afraid that would put some of you to sleep. But now let's wake up, right? Okay. It's a great pleasure to be here today. It's a privilege, actually. I have been speaking in UFO conferences literally all over the world, mostly in South America, but also many times in West Coast United States. Over 60 times I've came here. In spite of that, I haven't yet learned how to speak decent English. I'm still trying. So if you don't understand what I'm speaking, just raise your hand. I'll try to put in different words. But anyway, that has been my dream, speaking here in Washington, D.C. But why have I dreamed about speaking in Washington, D.C.? It's because when we talk about disclosure and secrecy towards UFO subject, it all started here. In a few buildings in this beautiful town, lots of information, but I mean really lots of information has been kept away from mankind. I'm foreigner, and I'm not supposed to be speaking about domestic issues like this, but unfortunately, we have to admit that U.S. government is the power holding the biggest amount of UFO information from mankind. And not only this, but also it is the U.S. government who has, for the last decades, imposed silence to other nations, such as Brazil, such as Argentina, such as Chile, many others in South America and all over the world. According to the political situation in these nations, they would comply, they would obey United States rules more or less, but in general, if mankind still doesn't know whatever it's supposed to know about other species in our environment, other advanced species in our environment, it's because of the very strong pressure made by U.S. authorities to keep it secret. Now, can you imagine that this is going on here in these many buildings where this information has been kept secret, very serious information that we are entitled to know. But in other buildings all over the world, in several countries, there are people who think on a different way. And they're starting to realize that this information can, at least in some points or in some measure, be released to the public. Now we have been taken by surprise by a few decisions made in governments such as UK, France, some of the Scandinavian countries, Spain, Chile, Uruguay, Mexico, Peru, Ecuador. Now, can you imagine Ecuador? Ecuador is a small country that now recognizes almost officially that UFOs exist. So did Chile, so did Argentina, so did Brazil. And eventually we have other powers coming forward and letting us know that something very big and serious is going on in our skies. Like the Vatican. Just a few months ago, we had a Monsignor, a man who is a close authority, a close friend of this current Pope and the highest authority in Vatican. Actually, he is the official astronomer. José Gabriel Funes, a man from Argentina who lives and has 2 PhD in astronomy and lives in Italy. He's official astronomer for the Vatican. He's the official advisor of this Pope about astronomical issues. And he declared just recently that, of course, extraterrestrial, they exist and they are our brothers. And not only that, but he also said that not considering the existence of other advanced species in the universe is underestimating the creative capability of God. Now, that came from one of the top authorities in the Catholic Church in the world. That's something to be taken seriously. And this is what I believe it was supposed to, by the Catholic structure, from up and down all over the world. All members of the Catholic structure understood this as a sign to start being more open as possible toward the subject with their people. Now, while this is going on all over the world, there are some countries that for some reasons different from each other that have released material about UFOs, official material. Brazil has done the same. We have managed to get in Brazil about 5,000 documents of UFOs from the last 50 years, released by the Brazilian Air Force and some from the Brazilian Navy and Army. Very few, actually. The most of them came from the Brazilian Air Force. Now, my intention here is to show you how we did it in Brazil, because unlike many other countries, what happened in Brazil was a decision taken by the government when he was kind of forced by society to open its files. When some other countries like UK decided to open their documents, and they did it like 2 years ago, it was a government decision. There wasn't actually a strong pressure by society. It was a government decision. Out of nothing, they decided to come forward and say, here are the documents, and they put all over the internet, and everyone can check on them. So did France. So did several other countries in more or less amount of material. But in Brazil, we have a different thing. Our government didn't decide it by itself. There wasn't nobody in our structure, in our administrative power in Brazil or in the military who decided, well, let's open these files and put them over the web so everyone can see it. No, they didn't decide by themselves. They actually accepted, pledged a request that we did formally through a campaign, a petition that we launched. And if this worked in Brazil, if we were able in our country to show to our authorities that they should open their files, and they actually did, so can any other country in the world. Now, we did it in a certain way. We had a procedure to make it happen that I want to present to you to see how it worked, and it actually worked. Right now, we have this 5,000 pages. And just a month ago, our Congress declared the June 24 date to be the official date of the UFO researcher in Brazil. Can you imagine that? We have that in Brazil. I believe there is also in Chile and in Uruguay dates celebrating the UFO research. Now let's start doing this presentation where you see how we conducted our petition in Brazil. How are you so far? Are you understanding my English? Is okay? All right. Thank you. You're very generous. All right. Gracias. Well, my friends, to start with, we had to create a committee of UFO researchers that is now composed by members of all Brazilian UFO community. It means our movement and the results that we achieved don't belong only to a small group, but actually belongs to, or is to be credited to a large group of people. We are about 15 to 16 now. People from several organizations and institutions, and also independent UFO researchers who built the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers. We started it back in 1996 when we organized the first World UFO Forum in Brazil, which was a conference that lasted a week long. We had 70 speakers. And by that time, we initiated a process of asking our government to come clear about UFOs to release its files. At that time, in 1996, the original founders are these guys named there. And in 2006, we have the first reformulation of our committee, putting in more people who could help us to achieve what we planned. And now, just a few months ago, we had new members coming. They joined the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers to help us to get into phase 3 of our campaign, which I will present to you in a minute. I was the president of it until February 2010. Now, the president is a geographer who works at the Congress in Brasilia. His name is Fernando Ramalho. Now, after the first discussions about how we would proceed in requesting the government to come clear about UFOs to release its files, sure, we realized that there was no point in coming to the government and say, hey, folks, we know you're hiding stuff from us, and we want you to come clear. You got to show us your files, everything you have. That would never work. We have to come up with a strategy very clear that had more chance to be successful. And the strategy was selecting the best Brazilian UFO cases in history with one peculiar thing. All the cases that we selected, we had to have documented involvement of the military. This is what we did. Because when we selected the 3 cases that I'm going to present you now, we have this idea. If we come to the government and ask them to come clear, to release the papers, at least about these cases, of which we have certified, documented involvement of the Brazilian military, they cannot say, we know nothing about it, sir, because we have documentation that leaked in many occasions, proving to us and to whoever wants to see it, that there was actually an involvement by the Brazilian military in evaluating, investigating, and involvement whatsoever in those cases we requested information about. And the cases were the Operation Saucer, that I believe that some of you, or perhaps most of you, have heard about it, and the program from the History Channel, Brazil's Roswell. Operation Saucer happened in the Amazon back in 1977, from September to December, and was, so far as we know at least, the major non-military operation worldwide designed to officially, mind this word, officially investigate the UFO activity. It happened in the Amazon, in the island of Colares, lasted 4 months. I'll detail this for you in a minute. This is a case from the 70s. Now, we also select a case from the 80s, which is what we call, and I quote, the official Brazilian UFO night, which was May 19, 1986, which is a big incident of a UFO flap in Brazil, when 21 spherical objects, each one of them with 100 meters in diameter, they were pursued by jet fighters, and eventually they became the pursuers of the jet fighters over Rio and São Paulo in Brazil. Case from the 80s. And of course, we also select a case from the 90s. And that couldn't be any other than the Virginia case, of which I have spoken in several documentaries that were presented in the United States and also in some conferences. And Virginia case is one of the top crash and retrieval incident in the world, perhaps if not the biggest one ever. It happened on January 20, 1996, and it was the crash of a UFO with the capture of at least 2 creatures while they were still alive. Now, let's see these cases in a little more details. Let's start with the Operation Saucer that happened in the Amazon in September, from September to December 1977. Now, the UFO activity over some islands close to the city of Belém in the Amazon was just outrageous. UFOs could be seen day and night, starting in the years at 74, 75. It got worse in 76, and even worse in 77. UFOs were attacking people. You would be seen at close into the villages, chasing people, beaming them with a ray of light, and they would faint. People would faint for minutes, hours, and days, and eventually they would die. When they become conscious again, and they were analyzed by doctors, it was found out that they were missing blood. They were anemic. This is why this phenomena was called chupa-chupa or suck-suck phenomena by the people there, because they believed that not only their blood was being taken away, but also their energy. And this is a fact, because some people, I've been many times to that area and talked to so many people, and all of them had the same description. They feel like their energy was taken off them. Sometimes, for some people at least, permanently. They never regained the strength of life that they had before being attacked. Now, the situation was so bad that by July or August 1977, the chief or the community leaders, the areas attacked by the chupa-chupa phenomena, went to the governor of the state of Pará and said, see, you got to do something. Our people is suffering. Almost 9% of the population in the island of Colares just went away because they're afraid of the suk-suk phenomena. And the Brazilian Air Force decided to put a program to investigate what would that be. And that program was called Operation Saucer. And it was run by a man named Uirangê Holanda, which was a captain at that time and retired as a colonel. I interviewed this guy back in 1997. Now, the major facts about Operation Saucer, or this big wave called suck-suck in the Amazon, are these 5 ones that I present to you now. First, thousands of contact with UFOs happened at short range, and they are still happening. But thanks God, with no more attacks. They are not happening anymore. Fact number 2, while the Operation Saucer lasted for 4 months, its objective were mainly 3. First, talk to the witnesses and write down their description of the sightings, their reports. Take as many pictures and as many hours of film as possible of the phenomena, officially by the military that composed the Operation Saucer. We're talking about something between 2 and 3 dozen men on in the jungle, armed and fully equipped to investigate the subject. And the third objective was, and it's written down in the official papers, it's official. The third objective was try to engage in a direct and safe contact with the intelligences beyond the phenomena. Now, there was already a knowledge that there was an intelligence beyond the phenomena. This is why it was written in the documents, in the official documents that we now have. As for the three of these objectives, over 3,000 pages of reports given by the witnesses were written officially by the military in these 4 months that Operation Saucer lasted. Plus, over 500 photos of UFOs were taken officially, and 16 hours of footage, no video at that time, 77 we're talking about. It was films of 8 and 16 millimeters in length, over 16 hours, including footage of motherships with several objects all around it over the Amazon River. These were filmed by the Brazilian Air Force officially. And what about the contact? Yes, there was a contact that happened in the last days of the Operation Saucer. By December 1977, Wirangê Holanda, that gentleman that is over there, he was with his men in an affluent of Rio Guajará-Mirim, of River Guajará-Mirim, when he had this close encounter with a cylinder-like object, about 300 feet in length, who almost landed, it almost touched the ground, but didn't, on the opposite bank river. It approached, stopped. It was a huge, like a skyscraper. A door opened at this up portion. A creature just like us went off, and floating, it went down to the river level. The military were in a small aluminum-like boat, and the alien, they came close, just like I am with this lady eating her banana. And they just looked at each other. No communication at all. No word was spoken. No telepathic communication at all. And the alien just went back, floating, to this cylinder-like object. And it started to ascend, started to go up. And then it took full speed and went away. Now, that's the gentleman. He told us this when he retired back in 1997. That's Wirangê Holanda. He's a very brave guy. This is why he was selected to be the commander of the Operation Saucer. And he confirmed facts beyond our imagination that now are even confirmed by other military that we have interviewed recently. Now, in this whole report of the Operation Saucer, we have also to talk of the people who were attacked. We are speaking about 300 to 400 people that were treated by that woman. She is Velaide Cecim, who at the time when it happened, back in 1977, she has just graduated from medicine school. He was sent for his first job assignment in the island of Colares, and he was the person, 24 to 25 years old, very young, but still very brave, who treated 300 to 400 from over thousands that were attacked by the Suk-Suk phenomena. She was smart enough to keep record of their health status So she could confirm that when someone was attacked, that person would actually have anemic status after that. Part of his blood was taken through the beam of light, or perhaps something in the blood. She confirmed. Unfortunately, these files are no longer available to us. She also informed, and confirmed, it was confirmed by other authorities, that at least 4 people died of those attacks. And those attacks were not only to people, but also to animals. Very few people know this, that also animals were attacked. I mean, dogs, cats, cows, horses, especially horses and dogs. And when it comes to humans, 75% of the attacks were against women. They would have scars from the upper part of her thorax and the shoulder, in the neck, and sometimes these scars, they seem like the wound has been produced for many days, but instead of that, it's only for a few hours. That was something very interesting, and also very tragic. Now, that was Operation Saucer. Now, why did it end on December? It was supposed to last as long as necessary. It wasn't supposed to end. And I'll tell you why. And then I'm going to tell you that actually we just found out that it did not end. It just changed the format, the command, and went on under U.S. military coordination in the jungle back in 77 and 78. But why did it stop? Or actually, allegedly stopped, but didn't. Because even though the third objective of Operation Saucer was to establish a contact with intelligence beyond the phenomena, when it happened, the Brazilian military was so frightened that they decided to shut down, afraid of they may lose control of the situation. Now, what happened is that when that contact that I just described happened among Wirangel Land and his men and that big spaceship, that cylinder object, he went to his superior in the city of Belém, where there's a big airfield from the Brazilian Air Force, to report the situation as he used to do regularly every week, report the situation of what's going on in the island. When he did so, his superior, which was Brigadier Protásio de Oliveira, was so shocked to learn that an actual close encounter took place among his men and an alien intelligence that he decided, shut down Operation Saucer. Just shut down. Bring your men, bring all the papers, bring all the photos, forget about it, don't talk about it to anyone. This is what he was told. But actually, it's not what happened. We just learned that one of our major suspicions about it is confirmed. And it is. It's just unreasonable that an operation that was designed to establish contact with another intelligence, when it happens, the operation stops, ends, it's closed. It's just not reasonable. That must be something that we still don't know. My suspicion was that the Operation Saucer was kept, but I didn't have any confirmation, any information at all about it. But just recently, a very top-ranking military in the Brazilian Air Force confirmed that not only Operation Saucer continued under a different name, much more secret, but also that it was run by U.S. military. When I double-checked, are you sure? When I double-checked with the man, with the brigadier, asking him, are you sure that it was run by U.S. military? He said, come on, AJ, at that time, if it wasn't for United States, we wouldn't have tires, we wouldn't have gas, we wouldn't have anything to fly our planes, to run our operations anywhere in the country. So it's kind of implied that it was demanded by US authorities to take over Operation Saucer, to go to a much more secret level and keep on going with the documentation of the UFOs in the Amazon, and perhaps, this is something to be confirmed, continuous contact with intelligences beyond that phenomena. This is something to be confirmed. I really expect that in the next months we will have that information for sure to be presented. I'm working on that right now. Now, the second case we're talking about is one that have produced many, many evidences. It's what we call the official Brazilian UFO night. And I tell you why we call it official. It's because it was such a big phenomenon that happened on May 19, on the 9th of May 19, 1986, that in the other morning actually, the Minister of Defense had to go public and national televisions in Brazil to declare, yes, my fellow Brazilians, something happened last night. Our jets have been chasing strange phenomena in our skies, and we are engaged in full investigation of the subject, and we should come up with a report in 30 days, which never appeared to us, at least to us. But the military, the top-ranking militaries in Brazil, they had access to that paper, to that document. Now, after our disclosure, we also do. It's here, and I'm reading to you in a few minutes its content so you can see what was concluded by the military about that. Now, the Brazilian UFO official night is considered to be the major wave or flap of UFOs in the country. It's when 21 spheres, 100 meter. Now, you don't have the metric system here. Let's put in US numbers. 300 feet in diameter. Can you imagine one sphere, a ball of a diameter of 100 meter just above, let's say, Washington? Can you imagine how big it would be? Now, can you imagine 21 spheres like that? This is the official measurement of the size of those objects over Rio and São Paulo for several hours. Now about it, and this incident involved all levels in the military and civilian authorities in Brazil, who set the country in full state of alert. 5 facts about it. First one, the UFOs, the 21 spheres, were fully detected, not only by ground radars, but also by airplane-borne radars, and also visually confirmed by the pilots. Fact number 2, 3 Mirage jet fighters and 4 American F-5E jet fighters started a pursuit that lasted several hours. Fact number 3, at that same moment that the dog fight was going on all over the southwest region of Brazil, especially over São Paulo and Rio and Brasília, Goiânia and Belo Horizonte. You can see this is a very large area. There was a high-ranking officer just in the air, flying from Brasília to the city of São José dos Campos. And he, as a military, as a very graduate authority in Brazil, he could come closer to the objects and witness what was going on. The other day, the situation was under control, but the minister was forced to go to the television and to admit what happened in Brazil. Of course, he, at that moment, did not say anything about alien spaceships or flying saucer or UFOs or something, but they were speaking about flight phenomena under controlled intelligence control. That was Minister Otávio Moreira Lima. And fact number 5, it's information that has just come to our attention through another guy who used to be a minister just after this other gentleman, who is brigadier, which is equivalent to a general brigadier in the United States, Sócrates Monteiro. Now, Sócrates Monteiro, at that time, he was in command of one of the major military Air Force installation in Brazil, and he was on the clock, watching everything happening, but always kept whatever he knew for himself and his men, of course. Never spoke publicly until last October, when I requested an interview with him, and for some reason he said, okay, I'm going to give you this interview. And he received me in his apartment in Rio de Janeiro and spoke to me for a few hours, giving me astounding information, doing great revelation of what happened during that night, which you're going to speak more in a few minutes. And of course, the third case, to refresh our memory, we have selected 3 of the most important UFO cases in Brazil to use to make the government to come clear about UFOs, at least about these cases, because these cases had documented evidence of military involvement. And the third case, it's an incident that I believe that most of you have heard of, Virginia incident. Is there anybody here who have never heard about it? Virginia? No? Who have heard about it? So most of you. So you are familiar with the situation that happened on the night from January 19 to January 20. An object was seen approaching ground with smokes, sparkles, and it was obviously in the process of crash, which actually happened. And all the military in a certain part of Brazil were put in alert. And in the other morning, which was a Saturday, January 20, very early in the morning, like 6:30 in the morning, some people that woke up and went to their jobs, they started seeing strange creatures in the vicinity of the city of Varginha. Now, Varginha is like, now it's 120,000 people city, but used to be like 70 to 80,000 population at that time. But still, it's a very important city in the state of Minas Gerais. Now, when these people saw this creature, about 7:30 a.m., they thought that they could be some sort of wild animals or monkeys or something. And they called the fire department of the city of Varginha, because in Brazil, when you see such a creature, when you see such a wild animal or a monkey or something, and sometimes we do have it. So where I used to live till 2 years ago, we would eventually find an alligator in our swimming pool. What was down the Amazon, that's a fact. Now, when people see some wild animal, they call the fire department. The fire department is supposed to come and make the capture using nets and whatever. Well, despite the fact that the fire department headquarters is only a few blocks away from where the creatures were seen, they took 3 hours to arrive to make the captures. It's because they were already organizing this capture with an army troop that was already monitoring the situation. They arrived together, the fire department guys and the military guys, the army guys with the truck. And it was decided that it would be the fire department guys who would go into the brush and capture the creature, which they did. The creatures offered no resistance whatsoever. They were weak, and they looked like skinny, brown, dark brown skin, no clothes, big head, with 3 protuberances in the head, not horns, but protuberances, big, round, red eyes. And what was the most impressive in them is that they had very visible veins in their upper arms, in the shoulders, and in their neck. Purple and black veins. And they were smelling very bad. That was in the morning. One creature was captured at 10:30 in the morning, January 20, and was taken away from town. But other creatures just went away. They were at large. They weren't captured. And by that time, all the police forces and military forces, intelligence forces in that part of Brazil were all in a state of alert, doing a full search to see if they could find it. Now, let's come to the facts about it. First, the crash was witnessed, radar detected. There's no doubt about it. Second, there were between 5 and 7 creatures spotted and reported by the witnesses, of which we know at least 2 were captured. We don't know, we don't have solid information about other captures. We have some information about 2 other captures, but it's not solid. It's not something that we can confirm. It's not something that I am in liberty, or I could come here and say this happened. What I'm talking about is what we have confirmed from several witnesses, including military witnesses, and from documentation that we got. And fact number 3, these creatures were captured alive, but barely. The first one, captured in the morning, died just after that. So we were informed by some of the military who took part in operations, the procedures for capturing and transportation of that creature. But as all the military and police forces were looking for strange creatures in all that vast area, at night, about 9:30, at that same night, 2 guys, young guys, that belonged to what we call the reserved squad of the Brazilian police military, or military police, which means they are not guys that use uniforms. They go without uniforms. They are military without uniforms. They use cars without signs, and they were using this car, a small Fiat car, going into search in a particular area of Virginia, when they almost run over a creature that came off bushes one side of the street, ran across the street, and entered the bushes on the other side. The car stopped. This guy, who was sitting in the passenger seat, goes out the car, gets into the brush, captures the creature with his bare hands, gets back to the vehicle, sits, and puts the creature in his lap and take it to the hospital. Now, none of the many military and police guys that were sent looking for strange creatures were ever taught or were ever told that they should be careful with the creatures. They had no knowledge. They didn't even know what they were looking for. They were told, go and look for something strange. All right, let's go look for something. If we go look for something strange in Washington, D.C., we're going to find a lot of it. Even in Brazil. But anyway, they didn't know what to look for. But he guessed that, well, that thing that just crossed the road, that must be what they're looking for. So he grabbed it with his bare hands. Now, that man was 23 years old. His wife was pregnant of twins, which he never saw, which he never met. They are now beautiful teenagers, 2 girls, living in Virginia. And he was on leave. He was not even working at that night. He was asked upon to work by his commanders and said, go look for something strange, son. So did many other guys. And after 3 weeks that he took part in this capture procedure, he died. His immune system was shut down. He had an infection, which was treated and healed. Then he had another infection in his armpit, his left armpit, who took it to an intensive care unit. his situation was getting worse and worse. There was nothing that could be done. And this guy eventually died. Now, he died of an infection that we all can get any time of the day. Most of us, if we are healthy, we can get these infections. And our body will deal with it. We don't even have to take pills for it. And if we did, it's very cheap pills that you find in any drugstore. So it's just to say that what killed that man was a very ordinary agent that could have, the man could have been treated easily and would be alive until now, but he died. Now, we don't know, we have information which is not confirmed, is not solid, about other people who have suffered injuries and eventually one other guy who may have died of the same situation involving the capture of these strange creatures in Virginia. But we don't have that information as solid as we would like, so we're only mentioning this. I'm only mentioning this so you know this. When we come up with solid confirmation about these other aspects of the Virginia case, we will speak about it. As for now, what we have for sure is the death of this gentleman, which is by itself a tragedy, a very regrettable tragedy. But this was an operation that wasn't conducted by the Brazilian Air Force, but by the Army, which is a different situation. Now, our disclosure, it was intended to ask all the forces, Air Force, Army, and Navy, to come clear about UFOs. So far, we have succeeded in obtaining material from the Brazilian Air Force, very few from the Army, very few from the Navy, because they are run separately in Brazil and they have different mentalities towards the UFO phenomena. And it is in the Air Force that we have the biggest support to our campaign. Now, okay. Oh, just a second, it should be. Okay. Now, then, having these cases in our hands, fully documented, with the involvement of the Brazilian Air Force, we decide to release the campaign or to start the campaign, UFOs Freedom of Information now. Now, this campaign had, at that time, one phase and a designed future phase, number 2. The number 1 phase was what we call the Brazilian UFO Manifest. It was launched in March 2004, and it was basically the collection of signatures to be added to a petition that should be delivered to our government with some facts about UFOs. And guess what? Through the magazine website and through the editions, the printed editions of the magazine, and our other organizations that are connected to us, we could gather 70,000 signatures of people that supported our campaign. And phase number 2, if that first phase didn't work as we planned, the phase number 2 would be the Brazilian UFO dossier, which is a little more strong document that was eventually released on December 2007. It was a formally engaging in official request for the release of specifically listed UFO documents. And in this case, we had to use a federal act number 11,101-205. Now let's see how it works. But before, let me tell you that we have designed this campaign to go on, and if necessary, we would launch a phase number 3 to make all our requests meet with approval of the government. So far, we have succeeded in getting a lot of documents, but still it's not enough. It's not what we want, or at least not all of what we want, and we still may go on with phase number 3, which I will describe to you shortly. Okay, what is the phase one? The phase one is pretty basic. We issue a document called the Brazilian UFO Manifest. We put over the net. We spread all over the country. We send to the press. We send to the congressmen. We send to the people. Everybody that is connected to UFOs and people who should know about what we're doing. And we basically stated 4 facts or 4 truths about the UFO phenomena, of which we are all very well familiar with. But most people are not. And these truths are, first, the UFO phenomenon is real. There's no doubt about it. Whatever it is real. All right? The UFOs, and this is truth number 2, are of extraterrestrial nature. I mean, extraterrestrial, they don't belong to this planet at this time. If they come from this planet in the future or other dimensions, I don't know. Or if they come from other planets. They are all different possibilities that can work separated or together. Anyway, what we mean is that they don't belong to any nation in this planet. What used to be sightings in the middle of nowhere, appearing in farm places and places that have very low population. Right now, sightings are all over big cities in entire world. Now, we have sightings here in Mexico, as we have in Brazil, as we have in Lima, Peru, as we have in Quito, Ecuador, as we have in Los Angeles, as we have in New York, Paris, Sydney, London, you name it. Like in Mexico, we have had fleets of dozens of spheres in the sky in broad daylight, which are filmed separately by different persons in different parts of town. They call them flotillas. And this is one of the biggest thing in ufology ever. Now, if you see the videos that have been put over the net, especially on YouTube, of the flotilla, where there are lots of them that can be balloons, but the real ones, they are just outrageous. They show so perfectly clear how these intelligences are approaching us so boldly. They don't care more to be hidden from us. They must, or at least I believe that they want to be seen and acknowledged. Now, if we have these 4 facts put together, UFO phenomena is real. They are of extraterrestrial nature. They show a continuous approach, and their activity is incessantly growing. The 4th truth, which we presented to our authorities in our petition called Brazilian UFO document, Brazilian UFO Manifest, couldn't be any other than it's time for action. This is basically what we asked our authorities. Let's do something about it. And we, the civilian UFO researchers, we want to team up with the military forces in Brazil to put our knowledge of this phenomena, our talent in leading with this phenomena, with the resources that you so abundantly have to reach answers about these other species in our skies, in our land. Now, when we did so, we presented this petition on May 20, 2005 to our authorities. Our targets were 3. First, of course, the President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, a very famous guy all over the world, because he's believed to be a very democratic, a leader in South America and this and that. But actually, he has some interest for the subject, but showed or issued no comments of our petition. Neither did the Minister of Defense, whose interest about UFOs is unknown, and he issued no comment whatsoever about our petition. However, the Air Force commander at that time, in 2005, Luiz Carlos da Silva Bueno, which of course is very interested by the UFO phenomena as a top-ranking military in the Air Force in Brazil, that he also issued very positive comments about our campaign. And on January 2:05, I got a call at my office from a spokesman from the Brazilian Air Force to say that the Brazilian Air Force officially acknowledges and appreciates our petition, our movement, UFOs, Freedom of Information Now, and we, the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers, are officially invited to go to the Air Force headquarters in Brasilia, the federal capital, to see the documents that we wanted to see. The documents about the 3 cases that we officially requested. Operation Saucer, Official Night of UFOs in Brazil, and Virginia case. And that happened on May 20, 2005. Now, that was the very first time in history when there was a meeting, an official meeting, among the Brazilian UFO researchers, civilian UFO researchers, and the military from the Brazilian Air Force, from any force, from military in general. And it happened on that day, that was a Friday, and we are very glad to go to Brasilia and watch what the military had to show us and hear what they have to say. Now, when I got that call, and it was also later confirmed in our visitation by that gentleman over there, a brigadier named Teles Ribeiro, he said, "Gentlemen, we at the Brazilian Air Force were instructed by our commander to open every door that you want to go in, to open every drawer, to open everything, show you everything you want to see." This is actually what happened during that morning when we visited the Center of Air Traffic Control in Brazil, which is also a facility for defense called SINDACTA, where I presented to our authorities. We were supposed to give to our president, to our Minister of Defense, and to the commander of the Brazilian Aeronautics, our document, Brazilian UFO Manifest, with 70,000 signatures to our petition. Now, this is me a little bigger than I am now. I lost 110 pounds in 2 years. Thank you. Right? We were taken inside all the facilities of the Brazilian Air Force headquarters. Some actually secret situation rooms where we were shown several stuff. We could see how the raiders they deal with the detections. When the detections are of unidentified targets, what do they do? What are the procedures they take? Everything. We could do that. That was a fascinating moment for us, an historical moment in our lives. These are my colleagues. Here is Marco Antonio Petit, who launched this campaign with me. Rafael Cury, and here the military. Here we have Claudeir Covo, Rafael Cury, Marco Antonio Petit, Roberto Beck, and Fernando Ramalho, who is now the actual president of the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers. Here are other photos of us in the radar room and signing the books with our registering our presence there. And also, right in front of the building of the Brazilian Command of Aerial Defense. And we have been inside that. It's where we could see, at some point, the documents that we requested. Now, while we were at the Brazilian Defense Command building, which is Condabra, we were received by this gentleman, Brigadier Ateneu Azambuja, who's my next victim. I'm about to interview him in a few weeks from now. He's given up he has been reluctant to give me this interview, but now he's retired for several years, and he decided that he will, and he let me know through a friend that we have, mutual friend, that in a few months from now, well, he will be willing to receive me at his place. He lives close to where I live in the city of Florianopolis, and he's the guy who I want to interview. Now, about the official night of UFOs in Brazil, we were able to examine some transcript of the radio conversations between pilots themselves and the pilots and the tower, and the several towers involved in this pursuit. There are several towers and 7 jet fighters all talking to each other, all chasing UFOs, 21 spherical objects, 300 feet in diameter, going here and there all over. Now, we have interviewed most of these pilots, except for one. This gentleman was piloting an F-5E, an American jet, when he disappeared from the radar for several hours. He ended up by landing. 1 hour and a half later, he disappeared in a city called Campo Grande, where I used to live till 2 years ago, with no knowledge of what happened. When he landed there, people came to the runway and said, "What are you doing here? It's in the middle of the night. How are you doing here? How did you got here? What are you doing here?" And he couldn't remember a thing. All the others have given us interviews of what happened, including their commanders and the commanders of their commanders, and all the apparatus, all the people involved in this chase. We have one way or another interviewed, except for this gentleman who eventually will come up with giving us an interview, and with the Brigadier Sócrates Monteiro, which was Minister of Defense later on, and gave me an exclusive interview last October. About it, unfortunately, we only got the transcript of radio conversation between the pilots, the towers, and everything. And about the Virginia case, which, I repeat, was an Army case, nothing was told us, nothing at all. There was nothing there. And the military said, the Air Force military said that they could help us to get more papers in the future from the files of the Brazilian Air Force, but they couldn't deal with the files from the Brazilian Army. We have then gone to a different phase, because even though it was a great moment, historical moment for us, because we could see some interesting material, we showed the goodwill, we saw the goodwill from the Brazilian Air Force personnel in taking us and receiving us. They even took us for lunch and everything. It was fine. It was fine. It was promised to us that the Brazilian government, through the Brazilian Air Force, would establish a committee for official investigation of UFOs, composed by civilian and military. And this is a promise that has not yet been fulfilled. We still want that to happen. And because that promise didn't happen yet, as well as we want much more papers, and especially papers about the Virginia case, we went on 2007 into phase 2 of the campaign, UFOs Freedom of Information Now. And the phase 2 was differently. In the phase 1, we are talking peacefully, nicely, or we are being asking politely, please, should you think that this is an interesting or important issue, we would like to hear you about, and we would like to have the information that you have about these 3 cases. But since we still are to see lots of the information that we requested, we decided to go into phase number 2. And the phase number 2 started on December 2007. And now we issued an official request using the Federal Act, that number, 11,111 of 2005, to get the release of UFO documents. Now, this act, it's based on the decreasing of the time for public access and release of documents related to national security. Before that Act 11.111 was issued in 2005, the law that was currently being applied was number 8159. And the difference between the two of them is this one. While the law or the act, the previous act, determined that documents and information pertinent to national security could be kept away from public for 50 years. Now, it's only for 30 years. And there is now another law that can be approved in the Congress in the next month that will get this to load this to 20 years. And you see, most of the UFO stuff, UFO documents, is under this category, ultra secret. And if you consider that so many great cases investigated by the Brazilian Air Force, Navy, and Army happened more than 30 years ago, all this material is supposed to be released to the UFO researchers right now. And this is something that we want to see happening. This is why we issued what we call Dossier UFO Brasil, or the UFO Brazilian Dossier, or the Brazilian UFO Dossier. Now, this have a different procedure to go on, because right now in Brazil, there is a committee of celebrities, or actually of authorities, who have the privilege to decide who should know and should not know certain information. And this is what is called the Committee of Inquiry and Analysis of Secret Information, CAAIS in Brazil, CAIS. These are the people. These are the members. They are top authorities in several departments of the Brazilian administration, civilian and military, whose president, the president or the coordinator of this committee is Minister Dilma Rousseff, who wants to be the nation's next president after Lula. Now, we are praying very much to God because we don't deserve that punishment. But even though, if that happened, we may launch a phase number 3 to go directly to that lady, to have her issuing her campaign promises, including the release of the files that have not yet been released. Anyway, phase 2 is going on. We issue the official request. We have this delivered to the proper personnel in Brazil, but not only waiting this, we started gaining support from different military authorities, because we realized that even though there was an official decision to release some material about UFOs, it would not be all that we wanted. It actually, what we have now is much less than what there is available, or that is still hidden in the several Air Force departments. It's to say, what we've been given is only a small fraction of what there is. Secrets that we are requesting. So we decided to go around it and to get support from very selected people in the military, both still on duty and retired. And these are very influential and recognized Brazilian military that have given us support, among many others. I have chosen only 5 of them, so we can do this short, because if I bring all the rest, we will stay here for 2 or 3 days, speaking of what their supports are about. Now, let's discuss very briefly the supports that we have been given by this personnel, these people. Now, the first one to give us his support was Air Force colonel and also the first Brazilian astronaut, Marcos Pontes. He is a very influential guy in the military in Brazil. And he said to us in an interview that was published in the Brazilian UFO magazine just a few months ago, that there are many things in the universe that we still don't know. All right. All ignorance will let us believe that there isn't life out there. Okay. The movement, UFOs, Freedom of Information now on a national scale can generate many results. Right, thank you. But what he's told us, and it was made public, is that censorship is not an option anymore. And it is necessary that our authorities, and he is an authority, not only recognize the seriousness of the UFO phenomena, but also take steps to reveal it to the nation. It came from this gentleman. From another gentleman, who is Air Force Colonel Antonio Celente Videira, who is also a high-ranking military of the Superior School of War in Brazil. He said that the opening of the secret UFO files in Brazil is a historical landmark. Okay. But now, these documents produced by the Brazilian military became important pieces in the analysis of the alien presence on Earth and for the improving and expanding national security. He's a strategist. He belongs, and he's actually one of the directors of the Superior School of War in Brazil. He's a consultant to many governments. He's a strategist. So he thought as a strategy when he gave us this information. And he also said that, I think that this is a very reasonable course of action, an equation involving flying saucer. He openly used the words flying saucers. This is very important. What I'm showing you is very important. Now, this gentleman, he not only gave us this interview and his fully support, as he started to go with us public about UFOs. He is now taking part in several of our UFO conferences in Brazil, presenting what he knows about the subject. And guess what? He joined it, and now he's a member of the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers. He is now one of the guys who is asking the government to come clear about UFOs. Isn't that something? Now, the other guy that I interviewed recently is another colonel from the Brazilian Air Force called Gabriel Brasil, who took part in Operation Saucer, but he was quiet for some time, then he decided to talk. And he gave me this statement in a very long interview. I just selected portions of the statements given to us by this gentleman. And Gabriel Brasil told us that he saw an official film of an alien ship. He used these words. He saw an official film of an alien ship approaching the forest. We're talking about the Amazon. It came down from the sky and threw a ladder for its crew to get off the object. But they soon returned to the ship, and it took off from the area, leaving a trail of intense light and allowing the military to take many photographs. Now, the most important part is this. All these photos, and now there is another confirmation of evidence of UFOs in Brazil, are now in the Air Force Command, Condabra, in Brasilia, and should be made public at once. Another guy that we interviewed, and this is a really gentleman, he has also, as well as Celente Videira, the other colonel, this is a brigadier and a former commander of the Brazilian Airspace Defense Command, who I play with him, I kid with him when I say, he is the guy who had the key of the safe where all the UFO secrets were kept in Brazil. And this is a fact. He laughs when I say this to him. He laughs, but this is the reality. He owned the key. That the key was in his hand. And that's a figurative language, of course. He had access. He was the guy who had access to all the documentation. And he once told me that. It was in March 2008. He gave me an interview and he said, when I asked, how much document are we talking about? What is the size of the files or the weight of it? And he told me, we have over 12 tons, 12,000 kilos. You put that in pounds, that's going to be something in between 25, 26,000 pounds of UFO papers, photos, footages in Brazil. And he said that he was commander of the Brazilian Airspace Defense Command. He ordered all the airfields in the country to gather all this information that was scattered all over, to put together and send to Brasilia. This is when he realized that he had over 25, 26,000 pounds of official, secret UFO information, photos, footage in Brazil. And this is what he told us. The release of UFO files will not cause any harm. It will not put the nation at war. It will not compromise national security. And will not cause panic. Because of that, he said, so all secret UFO files must be disclosed. And when that happens, now notice this. Pay attention to this. And when that happens, the UFO phenomena will no longer be an exclusive concern of the UFO researchers, but it will also be a subject for discussion by the entire nation. This is precisely what we want. We want the entire nation discussing this. This is why we're doing this campaign. And you know what? This gentleman was the guy who prepared a form. Actually, there was an official form that should be filled by every pilot flying in Brazil, either Brazilian flying in Brazil, civilian or military, or foreigner pilots flying in Brazilian territory. If they see an unusual object, a UFO, which in Brazil is called traffic age, and aeronautics language, traffic age. If any pilot see anything at all, doesn't matter how long the sighting takes and whatever it happens, as long as it is in Brazilian territory, this pilot it's mandatory that he lands, or when he lands, that he gets a form at a specific room in any airport of Brazil and fill it with information about the sightings. Now, when José Carlos Pereira was on duty as the commander of the Brazilian Airspace Defense Command, he ordered this form to be updated and to be better designed to contain more information about the sightings. And the information should be immediately digitalized. So all the information that are filled in that form is now in a huge digital data bank, a computer data bank in Brazil that can be accessed by our authorities. But we don't have access to it. We want it. We want to have access to it. And there are, excuse me? Yeah, that would be great if we had access to it. Now, yeah, well, perhaps someday. We're going step by step. Sometimes a few steps at once, but we're going slowly, but we're going to get it. We already got this gentleman to admit that the Operation Saucer material was that we had information about, 3,000 pages, 500 pictures, in 16 hours of footage. We also had this gentleman confirming to us that the Brazilians have that huge amount of papers and documents and everything. It's all being kept in the Brazilian Airspace Defense Command in the Brazilian in the building in Brasilia. And also, we had this gentleman confirming that they have thousands of reports for the last 5 decades of UFOs seen by pilots in Brazil. And they all are in these forms, which are now digitalized into a data bank. Now, guess what? This gentleman not only gave us this interview and his support, as he's also a member of the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers. He was with us only in this year in 3 different conferences, one in Curitiba, one in Ipuaçu, one in Peruíbe. He accepted to come as a UFO researcher or as a speaker in a UFO conference, just like we are here. He accepts to come and talk in UFO congresses in Brazil. And this has been very good for us because right now, people can see at a UFO conference in a different way. It's not only a gathering of what Steve called us just this morning, UFO ghetto. Now, some people are saying, well, maybe these guys are not so UFO ghetto, or UFO gang, or UFO nutcracks. Perhaps these guys are serious about what they are talking about. See, they even have a brigadier talking in a UFO conference with them. Now, this is the most important thing that can happen. These supports are very, very healthy for our campaign and for the Brazilian ufology, for the worldwide ufology. It's helping us to achieve what we intended. Now, the 5th support that we gained just recently came from another brigadier. See, brigadiers are the top guys in the military rank in Brazil. This is a 4-star brigadier, like a 4-star general. And he was not only minister of the Air Force in Brazil, but he was also commander of the SINDACTA, which is Integrated Center for Air Traffic Control and Defense in Brazil. And he received me for a visit last October, and he gave me this very interesting interview. It's a very long one. All of these interviews are online in Portuguese, in Spanish, and in English. You can go to our website, which is ufo.com.br. Just go on Google and say UFO Brazil. You'll be taken to the Brazilian UFO magazine website, ufo.com.br for Brazil, and you'll find all these interviews, transcript, and you can check on what they saw. It's much more than I'm reporting to you here. But let's keep to this part of the interview given by Sócrates Monteiro. And he said, Brazilian military have been monitoring the action of UFOs in the country for decades. We know that, but this is another confirmation that we pretty much enjoyed. But this is the thing. Without explanation, the Brazilian military, only filed the reports. What else can be done with them? However, he admitted or confessed to us that in one case, and he's talking about the official night of UFOs in Brazil, the UFOs detected by radar developed a velocity and speed. They reached a speed of 4,000 kilometers an hour, which is 2.5 thousand miles an hour, which is a lot. Now, the other piece of declaration that he gave us is this. UFOs have a technology far more advanced than ours. And if I was asked to declassify the archives when I was Air Force minister, I would have done so. And he said that the current minister of defense of Brazil has to do that now. We are expecting that to happen. Thank you. Now, because of all this, the 2 phases of our campaign, because of the passion that we have put in this, and pursuing our objectives, and going after one after another military in Brazil to see who of them can give us interviews to support our campaign, we have reached these supports, and we have obtained in separate dates since 2008 and on over 5,000 documents of UFOs in Brazil, officially. These are hundreds that were declassified so far. Not only documents, but also photos and lots of stuff that can now be accessed by any person in the country. Some of these documents, they show maps with UFO roads, or they show UFOs landed, or they show UFO sighted by multiple witnesses, including military, pilots, all sorts of cases, some of them very, very impressive. And guess what? Our campaign has not ceased. We are still doing this. And while we talk, there is people in Brazil, my people at the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers, working. And because of that, much more documents are coming. Day after day, we have something coming. Right now, we have papers from the dates, from the decades, because let me tell you that the government is releasing by decades. We had the 50s, the 40s and the 50s, then we have the 60s, the papers for the 60s, then we have the papers for the 70s, we have the paper for the 80s. We're not expecting, and it's going to happen anytime now. Perhaps when I go back to Brazil by Thursday, I'm going to find that the government has released the papers for the 90s, and then the year the last decade. And when it released the papers for the 90s, maybe Virginia will be among it. We don't know. But anyway, the documents keep coming. And we keep doing whatever we have to do to get the information out. Lots of paper. It has given us a lot of trouble to put all this information in a proper format, because when the government releases it to us, it's such a bulk of paper that we spend hours in classifying this thing, getting all in PDF formats and everything, so it can be published in the Brazilian UFO website, so can everybody see it. Right now, if you go to our website, you'll find over 5,000 to 6,000 pages of UFO documents that you can download, all in PDF formats. I'm sorry, all in Portuguese as well, but maybe in the future we're going to have this in English. I don't know. If we find that all the translators that are taken to put this into our language, into your language, and in Spanish also. All right. But among this 5,000, almost 6,000 pages of UFO documents, we have some pearls, we have some treasures, some very interesting material, impressive material. And in one of them that I brought you here, which is a document that was signed by the brigadier, again a brigadier, general, this time a 5-star, José Pessoa Cavalcante de Albuquerque. He is reporting to the official UFO night. Now, you remember when I told you that the Minister of Defense at that time, he was forced, because of the situation was so badly, so serious, that he was forced to go on the other day on national television networks and to admit that the nation was, I quote, invaded by strange objects last night that were pursued by our jets. Situation is under control, and we are engaged in a full investigation of it, and we should, and we will issue a report of it in 30 days. Now, it happened on May 19, 1986. This declaration was given on May 20, 1986. 30 days after that would be June 20, 1986. On June 20, 1986, we're all over his door waiting the report to come up, which it never did. Okay, let's wait 60 days, July 20. No signs of the paper. Okay, let's wait 90 days. Let's go back there on August. And again, no sign of any report about it. But guess what? We thought that maybe the military just forgot about it and there is no paper at all, no report at all. But we were taken by surprise by a few papers that were among the ones that were released for the decade of 80. And one of these documents is this one, which is confidential. It was signed by Brigadier José Pessoa Cavalcante de Albuquerque, dated June 2 or June 2nd, 1986. And I have just a small portion of it. It is the conclusion of this command that the observed objects were solid and under control by some sort of intelligence because of the capacity of pursuing the fighter's formation. Now,
if we have a few more minutes, do we? We still have, I don't see Steve. We do? All right. So let me read a few pages. Only 45 pages. I'll read 32. Okay. Forget my enthusiasm. Can't help. All right. I'll go to the paragraph 2. The paragraph 2 says, occurrence report. Due to the time limitation and specific knowledge limitations regarding the nature of the facts, this command, the Brazilian Air Force Defense Command, has decided to limit itself to simply narrate, describe the facts, and avoid any kind of speculation involving the Ministry of Aeronautics. Now let's jump to the conclusion. In this paper, it is described how the jets were scrambled, what they saw, the size of the objects, the maneuvers. They went from west to east, from west to the radar detection and everything, to go on and on. But at the last pages, when we finally get the conclusions, this is what it counts. Now, final considerations, it said. 1, based on the analysis of the above report events, what I just said to you, it is this command's opinion that, according to the information from the air traffic controllers, the pilots of the jets, and the previously elaborated reports from the Air Defense Command, that there are some points of coincidence regarding radar echoes, accelerations, illuminations of the objects involved, as well as their velocities and behavior, either observed by technician and detection and visual contact. And some of those coincident points that we can name are those phenomena which exhibit certain constant characteristics as followed. A, the objects produced radar echoes not only on the air defense system, several radars on the ground, but also in the intercepting airplanes simultaneously, with visual observation by the pilots. Now, you have several ground radars detections, several airborne radar detections, and visual sightings by personnel in the ground and in the airplanes. You have the perfect case. You have just the perfect case. Now, item number B. It is strange to notice the change in the velocity that came from subsonic to supersonic speed, besides hovering capability. Item C. The objects had varied altitude from below 50 feet high to above 400 feet high. D. Occasionally, the objects were white, but also could change color to green and yellow, showing intelligent, luminous behavior. E. They showed sudden acceleration and deceleration capability. They are describing a UFO here, or am I wrong about it? I am on the impression that they are talking about an extraterrestrial vehicle. Is that so? Now, read this. It looks like we're talking to a witness of a UFO, and you are seeing this in an official report. And item number 5, item F is that the object had sharp turns capability with constant radius and sometimes with undetermined radius. Item 3 is that the conclusion of this command is the observed facts in almost all presentations is that the opinion of this command is that the phenomena is solid and reflects some sort of intelligence by its capacity to follow and sustain distance from the observers, as well as to find information, and are not necessarily manned craft. This is signed by José Pessoa Cavalcante Albuquerque, which is a brigadier from the Brazilian Air Force. This document is also at the Brazilian UFO magazine website. Now, this is a very historical landmark who was achieved through the campaign UFO's Freedom of Information Now. That is, during the so-called Brazilian UFO night, official UFO night, what we call an invasion, the military were in full alert and in control of the situation and made all the necessary steps to evaluate what was going on. Not only pursuing, but also to find out what happened. Now, also, during the procedures of our campaign, we came across some material that was released officially by our military that is also very impressive. And among these papers are color drawings of UFO cases made by the military in field investigation, in official field investigation. These are some of them. Now, we're not talking about the civilian UFO researchers. This is what we basically do when we go to the field. How many of you are field investigators? How many of you have investigated cases in your life? Please raise your hands. All right. So what we do, we go to the field, we talk to people, we take their reports, we check reports from other witnesses, and we draw what they saw. We do color drawings of UFOs. This is something that the civilian UFO researchers do. Now, what we found out that in a committee called, just a second, let me go up here. Okay, that we found out that in one of the committees that was created by the Brazilian Air Force to deal with UFO researchers, which was called Sistema de Investigação de Objetos Aéreos Não Identificados, or Unidentified Aerial. Some of the papers, instead of flying objects, they would say aerial object. Instead of unidentified object, they would say unidentified aerial object. Investigation system, which was part of the 4th Aeronautics region in Brazil, in São Paulo. This committee investigated many, I would say several dozen cases of UFO in several states of Brazil, including of landings. And the military that performed these investigations, they come back to their headquarters and they made color drawings of UFOs. Now, what you are seeing is not drawings made by civilian UFO researchers. And you won't find this kind of thing in the papers released by any other country in the world. And we have this in Brazil from the 60s and from the 70s. Material in full color of UFOs landed with their doors open, with parts of them, with a triplan landed and a triplan in the door. These are cases investigated officially by the Brazilian Air Force, who, just like civilian UFO researchers, this military, they did their job well, and they did, including color drawings of the sightings that they investigated. This is something that we don't see every day, folks. When have you ever seen this in an official paper released by any country in the world? It's something that you don't see. But you can go online into our website and you find it. You can download it. Now, the great question is, the biggest of all is the cover-up policy maintained? Now, you see an ice back there. Much probably you may guess what I'm about to say. Is the cover-up policy maintained? Even though there are so many countries releasing papers. We have England, we have Spain, we have Peru, we have Chile, we have so many countries. We have Brazil now. Is the UFO secrecy still kept in Brazil? Yes, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid that what we have been given, not only by Brazilian authorities, but any other authority in the world, what has been given to the public, folks, is only the tip of a big, big iceberg. Because the military mentality didn't change. And I had come across many military to know how they think about it. And they think like this. If it's something that we don't know what is, in details, we won't talk about it. And if it's something that we can't control, that's definitely when we're not going to talk about it. That's precisely the UFO phenomenon. They don't know. They are as lost as we are in most of the cases. We have our theories, we have our guesses, we have lots of ideas, but for sure we still need to know more about this subject. We need to know much more. We are only in the beginning of our investigations. And even if the disclosure goes on as we would like it to go, and it definitely will, in a few months, or perhaps in a few weeks, or perhaps tomorrow or in a few days, we're going to have the 90s documents and for the year 2000 released. Even though everything that we may get will be only a tip of the iceberg. The hardcore, the XXX files about the UFO phenomenon, the alien presence in this planet is yet to be kept secret. The declassification or the disclosure in Brazil, that's something that I want to make very clear. It's not for us, the UFO researchers. Of course, this is what we want. But we actually want the public, we want the society to know what is going on. This is why we started this in the first place. And this is why we put so much pressure, we put so much passion also to get it done, to make it happen, to make the documents to come clear, to make the documents to reach the public. And they are not being given to us, the UFO researchers. There is no paper in my home given by a military, like they knock at my door and say, hey, Mr. A.J. Javar, you have been requesting paper from the Brazilian Air Force. Here they are. No, that's not what we asked. We asked the documents to be accessible to everyone. And where? At the National Archives in Brasilia and in Rio de Janeiro. This is what we want. We want everybody to know what's going on. Now, it's up to each one of them, to every one of us, to make the best use from this documentation. As to us, the UFO researchers, our intention is to show that we, without any doubt whatsoever, are being visited by several species that are more advanced than us, that are looking for something here that we have, that we may not know what it is. But in time, we will. This is it, folks. Thank you very, very much.